Now, for those of you who are looking to join the 3D code crowd and or just are curious about the application, the main thing to know and understand before delving into it or looking at it and really judging it versus probably its most closest competitor, which is ZBrush, in my opinion, is understanding that 3D Coat works with voxels, very much like the way Sculptress works, except that 3D Coat is more of a standalone, I don't want to say all-in-one, but application that does many things more than just sculpting. It's probably most comparable to ZBrush in general, except for this one main difference, which is that it uses voxels versus polygons. So when you sculpt in ZBrush, and let's say you stretch out a shape, those polygons that make it up get stretched as well. And that means any color information that's on those shapes will also get stretched. And so a lot of people get around this by using Dynamesh, Z-Remesher, UV unwrapping in ZBrush or whatever tool they want. But 3D Coat basically doesn't use that. So what we're looking at here, even though it's a 3D shape in essence on the screen, we're going to think about it as a 2D shape. So it has a length and a width, and essentially is a pixel, is what we're calling a pixel. This is a pixel. So your screen is made up of a bunch of these pixels, and each of them is assigned a color. So let's say we assign this a color. So these pixels that are making up the image on your screen is basically what we know, or what we'd refer to as a pixel. Now, the difference between a pixel and a voxel is that a voxel, unlike a pixel, it has length, width, and height. So it's three-dimensional. It basically represents a shape with volume. And so unlike many applications where you can do 3D modeling, you're working with polygons. If you want to do, say, Boolean operations where you're subtracting a shape from another shape or adding a shape to another shape, etc., a lot of times those Boolean operations really screw up the polygon flow of the model in question. So what we want to do is demonstrate how 3D Coat excels using voxels in this respect. So let's go ahead and look at a box shape here. Now I've labeled this one as low res because even though it's made up of these voxels, what makes up this shape still can be represented on the screen using polygons, so to speak. And don't get confused here. If I hit W, you'll see that there is a wireframe of these little voxels that are making up our main shape here. There's a ton of them, and they're divided into triangles, just to kind of give you a sense of what it would look like triangulated. But essentially, this shape is a bunch of cubes put together to make this one shape. So if we look down here, it says we have 230,000 visible triangles. Let me actually remove or turn off the layers with our other demonstrations. Actually, what we're looking at is 70,000 triangles. Now, that's just a representation. This actually isn't made up of triangles. It's just to give you some representation of how much size in memory this will take, how fast operations will operate on it. So the more dense it becomes, the longer it will take to do certain operations, and also take up more space in memory. So let's do one of those Boolean operations I was talking about. Let's grab a primitive proxy. Proxy is something that hasn't been committed to the screen yet, but in this case, we're going to use a proxy that sticks out both sides of this so we can cut a hole in it. And if I take this proxy and subtract it from our shape, what you find is that the polygon representation hasn't been damaged at all. The polygon flow is the same because it really isn't polygons. They are voxels. So you can do these Boolean operations very cleanly, very smoothly in 3D Coat and work, basically without the limitations of worrying about your polygon flow, etc., until later on, where you can actually do some topology over this shape very easily and rather quickly in 3D Coat and get an actual polygonal shape object just like what you have here out of it into other programs. So that's our low-res version. If we look at our low-res one, we're stuck at about 75,000 now, 75,000 triangles. And, and it's actually more to do this because we've increased to some degree the surface area, even though you would think it would be less since I subtracted some volume from it. So to some degree, you need to think of voxels in terms of volume. In other ways, it's not so much. But so let's go to our next model, which is the same thing, but it has twice, or it's been, I should say, its resolution has been increased one time, or basically it's gone from a factor of 1 to a factor of 2. In this respect, now we have, and when I say factor of 2, that's probably not the accurate way to say it, but essentially we have 350,000, roughly for 350,000 triangles making this up, or quite a few more voxels that are making up this shape. And you can tell this as I zoom out because this one's less dense than this one. So if I go back and pull up our primitive again, drag it over here, and subtract it, what you'll see is that the subtraction is roughly the same, but the major difference is you can see in the corner the edges, not only on the inside of where I subtracted, but also on the outside, are more beveled than the ones over here. On this higher resolution one, they're sharper. So if you want to get good clean edges, that they'll still have to some degree a slight bevel, but there are ways around that when you go to your topology tools. But essentially what you have are cleaner, sharper edges, but you also have something that's taking up more space in memory. But obviously it works pretty well on my computer at this point. So the next shape has been increased one more time, and if I hit W, you'll see that you almost don't even see any difference. But if I zoom in, you can see the wireframe is just way more dense on this one. And in fact, it's so much more dense that if I turn those off, I have roughly 4.5 million triangles in this one thing here. And with everything on the screen turned on at once, I still can move around very quickly, do operations really quickly, and of course it depends on your machine, etc. But mine is, I don't want to say low end, but it certainly isn't the highest end machine I've ever seen. I built it myself, but it works really well. So let's say we subtract out of this particular one our same shape. Now this operation took a little bit longer because we have more voxels to work with. But essentially, if I hit W again, you can see that our edges now have gone from a just slightly beveled edge to an even sharper, cleaner edge over here because we have a more dense mesh. So you can do hard surface shapes in this. You can do organic shapes in this. But the bottom line is the biggest difference between 3D Coat and ZBrush is the fact that it uses voxels, and now you know what they are.